I should have listened to the boy the first time he whispered it. "Grandpa, don't go home tonight." He didn't say it like a child being dramatic. He said it the way grown men talk when they've already seen something they wish they hadn't. It was late afternoon, one of those gray Midwestern evenings where the sky hangs low and heavy, like it's thinking about snow but hasn't decided yet. I was sitting at my kitchen table with a chipped coffee mug warming my hands, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the old wall clock your great-grandma bought back in '78. The house smelled faintly of dust and old wood. Quiet. Too quiet for a house that used to hold laughter. Then my phone rang. It was my grandson, Eli. He was 12 at the time. Thin voice, always sounded like he was apologizing for taking up air. "Grandpa?" he said. "Yeah, buddy." Long pause. I could hear him breathing. Not crying, not yet, just breathing. "Don't go home tonight." I leaned back in my chair. "What are you talking about?" Another pause. I could picture him chewing the inside of his cheek like he did when he was nervous. "I know something about her," he said. "About Grandma." Now, when he said Grandma, he meant my mother, your great-great-grandma Ruth, 83 years old, hair like silver wires, eyes sharp as broken glass. She'd been living with me for almost a year by then. After her second fall, the doctor said she shouldn't be alone anymore, so I moved her in. Thought I was doing the right thing, thought I was being a good son. Funny how pride can blind you. "What do you mean you know something?" I asked him. "She's been packing," he whispered, "and she told me not to tell you." That's when my stomach tightened. Packing. For months she'd barely left her bedroom except to complain about the thermostat or criticize the way I folded towels. Now she was packing. "Packing what?" I asked. "Everything," he said. "Clothes, papers. She burned some stuff in the sink." Burned. The word didn't settle right. I stood up from the table slowly. My knees cracked. The kitchen suddenly felt smaller, like the walls had inched closer while I wasn't looking. "Where are you right now?" I asked him. "In my room. She thinks I'm doing homework." Another pause. "She said she's leaving tonight," he added. "She said she's not staying in this house another minute." The house. I looked around at it. The yellowed wallpaper. The dent in the hallway from when I tried to move a dresser by myself. The place I'd poured 32 years of paychecks into. "Did she say where she's going?" I asked. "She said she has a flight." "A flight." I laughed once, a dry, humorless sound. "Eli, your great-grandma hasn't been on a plane since Nixon was president." "I know," he said, "but she showed me a ticket." Now that got my attention. A ticket meant planning. Planning meant money, and money meant something I hadn't considered. "Eli," I said carefully, "why are you telling me not to go home?" He went quiet again. Then, softer than before, "Because she said she doesn't care what happens to the house." The air left my lungs slowly. "Doesn't care what happens to the house." That wasn't a sentence you used casually. "What exactly did she say?" I asked. "She said," he swallowed. I could hear it. "She said if she can't have it, nobody can." I felt something cold move through my chest. My mother had always been a difficult woman. Hard, suspicious, convinced the world owed her and had cheated her in equal measure. But arson, that was a word you only used in movies. Not about your own mother. "Buddy," I said, keeping my voice steady, "go outside. Right now, take your jacket and go sit on the front steps. Tell her you're getting the mail." "What about you?" "I'm coming." I hung up before he could ask anything else. I grabbed my keys and walked out into the evening air. The sky was darker now, wind pushing dry leaves along the curb. My truck started on the second try, coughing like it shared my age. As I drove, memories kept rising up uninvited. My mother standing at the stove when I was 8, cigarette balanced between her lips, telling me not to trust anybody. My mother counting every dollar my father brought home, accusing him of hiding money. My mother slapping the kitchen table so hard the plates jumped when she didn't get her way. Control. That was her oxygen. And this house, it wasn't just mine. Technically, half of it had come from her when my father passed. She'd never let me forget that. Every argument ended the same way. "I made you," she'd say, "and I can unmake everything you think you own." At a red light, I gripped the steering wheel tighter. Could she really burn it down? The house wasn't just wood and drywall. It was where Eli had learned to ride his bike, where I'd sat through 3 winters after my divorce, staring at the ceiling and trying not to drown in loneliness, where my late wife's perfume still lingered faintly in the upstairs closet. I pressed harder on the gas. When I turned onto my street, I saw him. Eli was sitting on the curb, knees pulled up to his chest, jacket half zipped. He looked smaller than 12. The porch light was on behind him. I parked crooked and stepped out. "Is she inside?" I asked. He nodded. "Do you smell anything?" He shook his head. "Just something weird earlier, like chemicals." Chemicals. I walked toward the house slowly. The front door was closed, curtains drawn, 2 drawn. She liked to leave a crack. I opened the door and stepped in. The first thing I noticed was the silence. No TV humming, no radio static, just the faint creak of the floor under my boots. "Ma?" I called. No answer. I walked into the living room. The armchair where she usually sat was empty. Her knitting basket was gone. The little table with her medication bottles, cleared. My pulse started thudding in my ears. I moved toward the hallway. That's when I smelled it. Gasoline. Not strong, not yet, but enough. I followed the smell toward the kitchen, and there she was, standing by the stove. Coat on, purse over her shoulder, a small suitcase by the back door. In her hand, a box of matches. She looked at me like she'd been expecting me. "Well," she said calmly, "you're early." I stared at the stove. All 4 burners were turned on. No flame, just gas hissing softly into the room. "Turn it off," I said. She tilted her head slightly, almost curious. "You always did ruin my plans. Turn it off." She sighed like I'd asked her to fetch the mail. Then she leaned over and clicked 1 burner off. 3 still hissing. "Ma, you think you can trap me here?" she said. "Take my house? Decide when I die?" "This is my house," she smiled. Not kindly. "You wouldn't have it without me." I stepped closer, trying to keep my movements slow. "You're not thinking straight." "Oh, I'm thinking clearer than I have in years." She struck a match. The sound of it, sharp and sudden, felt like a gunshot in my chest. "Ma, don't." She held the tiny flame up between us. Her hand didn't shake. "I'd rather see it burn," she said quietly, "than let you think you won." Won what? There was never a competition in my mind. I was just trying to keep her safe, keep things steady. But in her world, everything was a battlefield. I lunged. I didn't hit her, didn't shove her. I grabbed her wrist. The match dropped to the floor and fizzled out against the tile. For a split second, we just stood there, my hand wrapped around her thin wrist, her eyes locked on mine. There was no fear in her face, only fury. "You ungrateful boy," she hissed. Boy. At 63 years old, I was still a boy to her. I reached past her and turned off the remaining burners. The hissing stopped. The silence that followed felt enormous. I picked up the matchbox and put it in my pocket. "You're not leaving," I said. "Oh, I am," she replied. "My flight's at midnight." "You're not getting on any plane tonight." She pulled her wrist free and stepped back. "You can't stop me." Maybe I couldn't, but I could do something else. I walked to the back door and kicked her suitcase aside gently. Then I picked up her purse. "Where's the ticket?" I asked. She didn't answer. I opened the purse myself. Inside, folded neatly in an envelope, was a printed boarding pass. One way, to Arizona. Departure, 11:58 p.m., paid in cash at the airport kiosk that morning. My hands felt strangely calm. "Who's meeting you?" I asked. She said nothing, just stared at me. I looked at her then, not as my mother, not as the tyrant of my childhood, but as an old woman standing in a kitchen that could have become a funeral pyre. "You were really going to do it?" I said softly. "If I can't have control," she replied, "no one does." There it was. Not madness, not confusion. Control. I stepped outside and called the police. I didn't dramatize it, didn't accuse her of attempted murder. I just said there was a gas leak and I needed assistance. They came within 10 minutes. When the officers walked her out, she didn't look at me. She looked past me, like I'd already ceased to exist. Eli was still sitting on the curb, watching. As they put her in the back of the patrol car for a mental health evaluation, he walked up beside me and slipped his small hand into mine. "Is she mad at you?" he asked. I watched the car pull away. "No," I said. "She's mad at the world." We stood there in the quiet street while the last of the daylight drained from the sky. The house behind us, still standing, still ours. But something had shifted. That night, as I locked the doors and turned off every appliance twice, I realized something that would take me years to fully understand. Sometimes the people who built your life are the same ones willing to burn it down, just to prove they still can. And sometimes, son, the bravest thing a man can do is strike the match out of his own mother's hand. I didn't know yet that this was only the beginning, but I could feel it in my bones, and bones don't lie. You'd think the house would feel safer after that. It didn't. It felt wounded. That night, after the patrol car lights faded and the gas smell finally cleared, I sat at the kitchen table with Eli across from me. Same chipped mug, same ticking clock, but the air had changed. It was thinner somehow. He kept glancing toward the hallway like she might come walking back in. "Are they taking her to jail?" he asked. "No," I said. "Hospital first. They'll evaluate her." I didn't say the word psychiatric. 12-year-olds don't need that weight. He nodded, but didn't look relieved. "You're not mad at me for telling you, right?" he asked quietly. That question cut deeper than anything that had happened in that kitchen. I reached across the table and squeezed his shoulder. "You may have saved both our lives." He swallowed hard and looked down at the table. Kids don't always know how close they've come to disaster. Sometimes that's a blessing. After he went to bed, I walked the house alone. I opened windows, checked every burner twice, smelled the air like a bloodhound. My hands moved automatically, but my mind kept replaying that tiny flame between her fingers. No shaking, no hesitation, just conviction. That was the part that unsettled me. It wasn't confusion, it wasn't dementia fog. It was pride. By midnight, I was sitting in the dark living room. No lights on, just street lamp glow slipping through the blinds. Her suitcase still by the back door, half zipped. Clothes folded neatly inside, her good shoes packed, her jewelry gone from the dresser upstairs. This hadn't been a tantrum. It had been an exit. I opened the envelope with the boarding pass again. One way to Phoenix. No return. Paid in cash. 83 years old, and still capable of disappearing without looking back. I leaned my head against the back of the couch and closed my eyes. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't angry at her. I was tired. Tired of being the responsible one, the steady one, the son who fixed things. Because here's the truth most people won't admit about their parents. Sometimes they don't want saving. Sometimes they just want the last word. Around 2 a.m, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. "Mr. Carter?" a woman's voice said. "This is St. Mark's Behavioral Unit. Your mother has requested her belongings." Requested, not apologized, not explained, requested. "She's medically stable," the nurse continued, "but she's very insistent on leaving as soon as possible." Of course she was. Control again. "I'll come in the morning," I said. After I hung up, I walked to the hallway mirror and looked at myself. Gray at the temples. Lines around the mouth that hadn't been there 10 years ago. A man who thought he'd already survived the hardest parts of life. I realized something standing there. If I brought her back home, she'd try again. Maybe not with matches, maybe not with gasoline, but something. Because losing control to her was worse than losing everything. The sun started creeping up just after 6, pale light through the kitchen window. Eli padded in, hair messy, eyes cautious. "Is she coming back?" he asked. I poured coffee slowly. "No," I said. He studied my face, searching for doubt. "There's going to be some changes," I added. "Grown-up ones." He nodded, like he understood more than he did. Later that morning, sitting in a hospital consultation room that smelled like antiseptic and overcooked eggs, I watched my mother across a plastic table. She looked smaller there, frailer, but her eyes were the same. "You called the police," she said calmly. "You were going to light the house on fire." She shrugged slightly. "It's only a house." I leaned forward. "It's my life." She stared at me for a long time. Then she said something I'll never forget. "If you wanted a life of your own, you should have left sooner." That's when it hit me. She'd never seen the house as mine, never seen my choices as separate from her shadow. In her mind, I was still orbiting her, and when she felt that orbit weakening, she'd rather set the whole sky on fire. I signed papers that day. Temporary psychiatric hold turned into a longer-term evaluation. From there, assisted living was recommended. Structured environment, supervised. She didn't fight the paperwork. She just looked at me once and said, "You think this is victory?" I didn't answer, because it didn't feel like victory. It felt like closing a door I'd kept open my whole life. When I left the hospital, the sky was bright and clear. Too bright. I sat in my truck for a long time before starting it. Not crying, just grieving. Not for the mother I had, for the one I never did. That evening, Eli and I ordered pizza. Ate it on the living room floor. No gas hissing, no tension in the walls. Just quiet. Real quiet. And I realized something, sitting there cross-legged at 63 years old with grease on my fingers. Sometimes revenge isn't dramatic. Sometimes it's just refusing to let someone burn you down, even if they gave you life. And sometimes, son, the hardest thing you'll ever do is choose peace over loyalty. The house stayed quiet after that. Too quiet. You ever notice how a place holds on to tension even after the shouting stops? Like drywall remembers. Like floorboards store arguments the way wood stores heat. For the first few nights, I barely slept. Every little sound, the heater kicking on, pipes shifting, made my eyes snap open. I'd lie there staring at the ceiling, thinking about that hiss of gas, about that tiny flame. I started keeping the matchbox in my dresser drawer, not as a trophy, as a reminder. Eli didn't ask about her much. Kids adjust faster than adults. Or maybe they just bury things deeper. But I caught him checking the stove knob sometimes. That hurt. One afternoon about a week later, I drove out to the assisted living place they'd moved her into. Clean building, beige walls, fake plants in the lobby. Smelled like lemon disinfectant and boiled vegetables. They had her in a small room facing a parking lot. No suitcase anymore. Just her sitting upright in a stiff-backed chair like she was waiting for a train that had been delayed. She didn't look surprised to see me. "You came," she said. "I always do." That was our pattern. No matter what she did, I showed up. She studied my face carefully. "Did you fix the stove?" "Yes." "Good. Wouldn't want strangers buying a broken house." There it was again. Ownership. Control. "You're not coming back," I told her. She didn't blink. I assumed as much. No tears, no pleading, just calculation. "They'll take everything from you," she said after a while. "Taxes, repairs. That boy. You'll drown under it." "I've been drowning since I was 9, I replied. That made her pause. Just a flicker. For the first time, I think she realized I wasn't playing the role anymore. She leaned back slightly. You always were too soft. Maybe I was. Soft enough not to strike the match. Soft enough to call for help instead of letting pride win. I stayed 20 minutes. No more. When I stood up to leave, she said something that followed me all the way home. You think you stopped me, she said. But you just delayed the fire. I didn't answer her. But the words stuck. Because here's what I hadn't told Eli. The gasoline hadn't just been in the kitchen. I'd found a rag soaked in it in the basement near the furnace, and a half-empty container behind the shed. She'd planned it. Multiple ignition points. That wasn't impulse. That was strategy. Back home, I sat on the back porch while Eli rode his bike up and down the driveway. The evening light hit the siding of the house just right, made it glow warm. Still standing, still ours, but I couldn't shake what she'd said. Delayed the fire. That's when it hit me. The house wasn't the only thing she'd tried to burn down. She'd tried to burn down my independence, my authority, my right to make decisions without her shadow hanging over them. And for the first time in my life, I had chosen myself over her. That realization felt strange, heavy, like learning to walk on ground that didn't tilt toward someone else's anger. A few days later, I got a call from the airline. They needed confirmation about a refund on the unused ticket. One way to Phoenix, paid in cash, no return. I told them to cancel it. The woman on the phone asked politely, "Reason for cancellation?" I thought about it for a second. "Change of plans," I said, because that's what it was. Not just her plans, mine. That night, after Eli went to bed, I walked through the house again, slow, steady. I touched the walls, the banister, the kitchen counter, not checking for danger this time, just claiming it. Sometimes, son, revenge isn't loud. It isn't about punishment. It's about survival. It's about refusing to let someone else's chaos become your inheritance. She wanted fire. What she got was distance, and distance can burn colder than flames ever could. About 3 weeks after the hospital, I got another phone call. Not from the facility, from my bank. Now, when a bank calls an old man directly, it's rarely to wish him a good day. "Mr. Carter," the woman said, "professional but tight around the edges. We need to verify some recent withdrawal attempts on your joint savings account." Joint. That word hit harder than it should have. My mother and I had opened that account 10 years ago after my father died. It held what was left of his insurance payout, and a chunk of what she'd insisted was family money. I hadn't touched it in years. Neither had she. "What attempts?" I asked. There were 3 requests yesterday afternoon to withdraw $25,000 each. $75,000 in one day. "Was it successful?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "No, sir. The signature didn't match our records. We froze the account temporarily." I closed my eyes. She hadn't just planned to burn the house. She'd planned to empty the war chest before she boarded that midnight flight. Control, remember? Fire for the property, cash for the escape. "Who made the request?" I asked. There was a pause on the line. "Your mother came in personally, Mr. Carter." Of course she did. 83 years old and still walking into a bank with her spine straight and her chin lifted like she owned the building. I thanked the woman and hung up. Then I just sat there at the kitchen table. You ever realize how deep a person's reach goes only after you try to pull away? She'd been planning this longer than I knew. The packing, the gasoline, the ticket, the bank. Not a breakdown. An exit strategy. I drove back to the assisted living place that afternoon without calling first. She was in the common room, playing cards with 3 women who looked half asleep. When she saw me, she laid her cards down like she'd been expecting this confrontation all day. "You went to the bank," I said quietly. She didn't deny it. "It's my money. It's a joint account." She gave me a thin smile. "It was your father's." That old argument again. Ownership through memory, control through inheritance. "You were going to take $75,000, I said. "For my new life," she replied. New life, at 83. I almost laughed. You weren't going to Arizona to rest, I said slowly. You were going to disappear. She leaned back in her chair. You say that like it's a crime. It is when you leave fire behind you. That made her eyes flash. You called the police on your own mother, she snapped. You think I owe you gentleness? I stood there looking at her. All those years of sharp words, of subtle guilt, of reminders that I owed her for existing. And now this. You don't owe me gentleness, I said. You owe me honesty. She didn't respond. Instead, she said something colder. If you hadn't interfered, you wouldn't be standing here broke and alone. Broke. She assumed that's what I feared most. Money, not loyalty, not love. Money. That's when I understood something clear as daylight. She believed I was motivated by the same thing she was. Control disguised as security. But here's the part she miscalculated. I'd already let go. I walked to the administration office before leaving, removed her access from the joint account, closed it entirely, transferred what remained into a trust account under my name only, earmarked for her medical care. No more open doors, no more shared levers. When I told her later that week, she stared at me for a long time. You finally learned, she said. Learned what? To protect yourself. It wasn't praise. It was recognition. And that, strangely, felt heavier than any insult she'd ever thrown. That night, Eli and I were sitting on the porch steps watching lightning bugs blink in the yard. He leaned his head against my arm. Is it over now? He asked. I looked at the house. Solid, still standing, still ours. For now, I said, because here's the truth, son. Fire doesn't always come from matches. Sometimes it comes from paper, from signatures, from old grudges that smolder for decades. I stopped her from burning the house, but I was just beginning to understand. The real fire had been burning inside her long before I ever smelled gasoline. You'd think after the bank stunt, she'd slow down. She didn't. Fire doesn't quit just because you take the matches away. A week after I closed the joint account, I got a certified letter in the mail. Thick envelope, law firm return address, the kind that makes your stomach drop before you even open it. I stood at the kitchen counter holding it for a long minute. Eli was doing homework at the table, pencil tapping. You gonna open it? He asked. Eventually, I said. I slid it open with a butter knife. Inside was a formal notice. My mother had contacted an attorney claiming I had coerced her into psychiatric confinement and unlawfully seized shared assets. She was requesting a review of financial control and property rights related to the house. Property rights. There it was again. Even after trying to burn it down, she wanted legal leverage over it. I didn't react right away. Just read it twice. Slow. It wasn't a lawsuit. Not yet. But it was pressure. And she knew exactly what she was doing. Old enough to look fragile. Sharp enough to weaponize it. I folded the letter neatly and put it back in the envelope. Eli watched my face carefully. Bad? He asked. Complicated, I said. That night, I didn't sit on the porch. I sat in my bedroom with a house deed spread out on the bed. Yellowed paper. My father's signature. My mother's. Then mine after probate. Legally, she had transferred her share to me when she moved in. I remembered the conversation now. Her insisting it was simpler if everything stayed under one name. At the time, I thought it was trust. Now I realized it was positioning. If she left, if something happened, she could claim vulnerability, claim manipulation, control from a distance. I slept poorly. The next morning I went to see her again. She was alone this time, sitting by the window in her small room, sunlight outlining the sharp edges of her profile. You sent a lawyer after me? I said. She didn't turn around. I'm protecting myself. From what? From being erased. That stopped me. Erased. All this time I thought she was fighting for property. Maybe she was fighting for relevance. You tried to burn the house down, I reminded her. I tried to end something, she said, quietly. What? She finally looked at me. You. The word hung in the air between us. Not kill. End. She didn't mean physically. She meant independence. She meant the version of me that didn't orbit her anymore. You can't stand that I don't need you, she said. I laughed once. Soft. Tired. I needed you for 50 years. That was enough. She stared at me for a long time, and then, for the first time in my life, I saw something crack. Not rage, not pride, fear. You'll leave me here, she said. It wasn't a question. That's what this had been about. Not Arizona, not money, abandonment. But here's the bitter truth, son. Some people push you toward leaving just to test, if you will. And when you finally do, they call it betrayal. I'm not burning with you, I said quietly. Silence filled the room. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. Not physically, just diminished. The lawyer letter fizzled after that. No formal filing, no follow-through. Maybe the attorney saw through it. Maybe she realized the paperwork would only expose her own planning. But something changed between us. The phone calls stopped. The threats stopped. The sharp remarks dulled. And in their place came something colder. Distance. Weeks passed. Eli stopped checking the stove knobs. I stopped waking up to phantom hissing sounds in the night. The house began to feel like mine. Truly mine. And one evening, sitting alone at the kitchen table again, I understood something that took me 63 years to learn. She hadn't wanted the house. She wanted power over the house. Power over me. When she lost that, she reached for fire. But fire needs oxygen, and I finally stopped giving her any. Sometimes revenge isn't loud, son. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's refusing to fight. And sometimes, the most painful thing you can do to someone who thrives on chaos is let them sit alone in the smoke they made themselves. You'd think distance would cool everything down. It doesn't always. Sometimes it just gives resentment time to sharpen. It was late October when the call came. Not from her, from the assisted living director. Mr. Carter, the woman said carefully, your mother has requested to be discharged. I leaned back in my chair. On what grounds? She claims she's mentally competent and being held against her will. Of course she did. She's free to leave, I said. No one's stopping her. There was a pause. She says she'll be coming home. Home. That word again. Like it still belonged to her. She doesn't have a key, I said. Another pause. Softer this time. She says she made copies years ago. Now that got my attention. After I hung up, I walked straight to the front door and checked the locks. Then the back. Then the garage. Old habit creeping back in. Copies. I could picture it. Her quietly handing a spare key to someone, tucking one into a coat pocket, planning for leverage even when things seemed calm. I changed every lock that afternoon. Deadbolts, garage code, back gate latch. Not angrily. Methodically. That evening, Eli watched me install the last lock. Is she coming back? He asked. Not without knocking, I said. He nodded. He didn't look scared this time. He looked steady. A week later, she showed up. I wasn't expecting drama, but that's exactly what it was. She arrived in a taxi. No suitcase this time. Just her purse. Coat buttoned tight. Chin lifted like she was walking into a courtroom. I saw her from the living room window. I didn't rush. I opened the door before she could knock. She looked surprised at that. I live here, she said immediately. No, I replied. You lived here. She tried the old tactic, stepping forward as if momentum alone would grant her entry. The door didn't move. New deadbolt. You can't keep me out of my own house, she said sharply. It's legally mine. Her jaw tightened. I gave it to you. Yes. You owe me. There it was, the root of it all. I shook my head slowly. I don't. The taxi driver was watching from the curb, pretending not to. You'd leave your own mother on the street, she pressed. No, I said. I'd drive her back somewhere safe. Her eyes narrowed. You think you're righteous? No, I said quietly. I think I'm done. That word landed heavier than I expected. Done. Not angry, not fighting, just finished. For a moment I thought she might try something. Yell, cry, cause a scene. Instead, she looked at the house. Long, slow, like memorizing it. Then she said something I'll never forget. You'll be alone in there. I didn't answer right away. Then I said, better alone than controlled. Silence. The wind moved a few leaves across the driveway. She stood there another few seconds. Then she turned, got back into the taxi without another word. No explosion, no fire. Just retreat. I stood in the doorway long after the car disappeared. Eli came up beside me. Is that it? He asked. For now, I said, and this time, I meant something different. Because here's the truth, son. When someone's whole identity is built on controlling you, your peace feels like punishment to them. She tried fire, she tried money, she tried law, she tried guilt, and when none of that worked, she tried fear. But fear only works when you still need approval. That night I slept through until morning for the first time in months. No phantom hissing, no imagined footsteps. Just quiet. Real quiet. Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying someone. Sometimes it's about refusing to let them destroy you. And sometimes the final victory isn't loud at all. It's just a locked door, and the strength not to open it. You'd think that was the end of it. Locked doors, changed codes, taxi disappearing down the street like a chapter finally closing. But people like my mother don't fade quietly. They wait. It was just past midnight when the phone rang. That kind of ring, in the dark, hits different. It doesn't sound like communication. It sounds like warning. I rolled over and grabbed it before the second ring. Hello? Static for a second. Then her voice. Calm, clear. They moved me, she said. No greeting, no hesitation. Where? I asked. A different facility, smaller. They think it'll be easier to monitor me. Monitor. That word carried weight. Why are you calling? I asked. A small pause. Because you won't answer during the day. Fair. What do you want, Ma? Another pause. Longer this time. I want to know if you're sleeping well. That caught me off guard. Yes, I said slowly. I am. I'm not. There was no drama in her voice. No manipulation. Just statement. Silence stretched between us. You always slept heavy as a boy, she continued. Nothing woke you. I stared into the dark ceiling. I learned, I said. She gave a small breath that might have been a laugh. You did. More silence. Then she said something I didn't expect. I didn't want to burn you. That made my chest tighten. I wanted you to feel what it's like when something gets taken. Taken. That was the wound. My father died suddenly. Left her alone with a house she never felt secure in. A son who slowly built a life she couldn't direct. She saw independence as theft. You weren't losing anything, I said quietly. I was losing you. There it was. Not rage, not control. Fear. But fear twisted long enough turns into something dangerous. You pushed me away, I said. I pushed because you pulled, she answered. We'd been doing that dance for decades. Push, pull, control, resist. I'm not coming back into that, I said. I know. Another pause. I don't have much time, she said suddenly. The words didn't feel theatrical. They felt real. What do you mean? My heart's not what it used to be. For the first time in this whole saga, I felt something other than tension. Fragility. I'm not calling to fight, she said. I'm calling because I don't want the last thing you remember to be a match in my hand. I closed my eyes. For months, that image had replayed in my head. Her face lit by flame. You made your choices, I said gently. So did you. We both let that settle. Are you safe? She asked finally. Yes. And the boy? He's fine. Another long silence. Then she said something that surprised me more than any threat ever had. I never knew how to let you grow. It wasn't an apology, but it was close. You didn't have to burn the house to say that, I replied. No, she admitted. Her breathing sounded thinner now. I thought if everything fell apart, you'd need me again. There it was, the ugly truth of it all. She didn't want destruction. She wanted relevance. And she mistook fear for attachment. You don't have to scare someone to matter, I said quietly. She didn't respond right away. Then softly, I didn't know that. We sat there in the dark, two stubborn people who had spent a lifetime misunderstanding each other. I won't try again, she said finally. I believed her, not because she sounded defeated, because she sounded tired. I'm not opening the door, I told her. I know. I won't share control. I know. But I'll visit, I added. Silence. Then a small, fragile breath. That's enough. We didn't say goodbye dramatically. Just a quiet end to the call. When I hung up, I didn't feel victorious. I felt older. Older in a way that comes when you finally understand your parents as flawed humans instead of giants. The next morning, I told Eli she'd called. He looked thoughtful. Is she still mad? He asked. No, I said. She's just human. And that's the hard lesson, son. Sometimes the people who hurt you aren't monsters. They're scared. And scared people set fires thinking it'll keep them warm. But fire doesn't fix loneliness. It just leaves ash. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stand in front of the flame without becoming it. After that midnight conversation, things settled. Not perfectly, just quietly. I visited her once a week. The new place was smaller, fewer residents. Less perfume in the air trying to hide the smell of age. She kept her room neat, bed made tight, shoes aligned under the chair like she was waiting for inspection. She didn't talk about the house anymore. Didn't talk about Arizona. Didn't talk about money. Mostly, we talked about weather. Old recipes. People who'd been dead 20 years. It felt strange. Like meeting a version of her that had finally run out of fuel. Then, one Sunday afternoon, while Eli and I were raking leaves, my phone buzzed again. Facility number. I knew before I answered. Mr. Carter, the nurse said gently, your mother collapsed this morning. It was her heart. That word again. Heart. As if it had ever been simple. Is she conscious? I asked. Briefly. She asked for you. I looked at Eli, who was leaning on the rake, watching my face. I'll be there, I said. The drive felt shorter than usual. Or maybe I just didn't remember it. When I walked into her room, she looked smaller than ever. Not fierce, not sharp, just old. Machines beeped softly beside her bed. Oxygen tubing rested against her cheek. Her eyes opened when she heard my boots on the floor. You came, she whispered. I always do. That almost smile flickered. We didn't waste time. Old people don't when they know the clock's louder than usual. I was wrong, she said. About what? There were so many options. I thought if I could control everything, I wouldn't feel small. Her hand shifted slightly on the blanket. I took it. It felt fragile, papery. You don't look small, I said. She gave a faint scoff. Even then, I tried to burn what you built, she said, because you built it without me. That one landed. I never wanted to leave you behind, I told her. You were supposed to, she replied. That surprised me. You're supposed to leave, she continued, breath thin. That's how it works. I just didn't know how to let you. For the first time in my life, I heard regret without defense. I don't hate you, I said quietly. She studied my face carefully. No, she whispered. You just stopped orbiting. That was the closest she'd ever come to understanding it. The machine beside her beeped in a slower rhythm. You'll keep the house, she said. Yes. You won't sell it out of spite? No. Good. Another small pause. Don't make the boy afraid of fire, she added. I almost smiled. I won't. Her eyes drifted toward the window. You are a good son, she murmured. I didn't argue, because sometimes when someone is leaving, you don't correct them. You just let the sentence exist. She passed that evening. No flames, no shouting, just a long exhale that didn't return. I stood there a while after the nurse covered her with a sheet. Not crying, not relieved, just finished. When I got home, Eli was sitting at the kitchen table. He looked up. Is she gone? He asked softly. Yes. He nodded. Then he said something that surprised me. Does that mean the house is safe now? I looked around at the walls, the stove, the quiet. It was always safe, I said, but we had to learn how to protect it. That night I slept deeply. No phantom gas, no footsteps, just stillness. And here's what I realized. Sitting alone in the living room the next morning with sunlight pouring through the blinds. Some people don't know how to love without controlling. Some don't know how to stay without threatening to leave. And some only understand peace when their fight runs out of strength. She tried to burn the house, but in the end, she just burned through her own fear. And sometimes, sun, the fire that almost destroys you, ends up lighting the truth instead. The house felt different after the funeral. Not haunted, just unobserved. Like for the first time in my life, no one was watching how I folded towels. No one was judging the thermostat setting. No one was measuring whether I'd done enough. Silence can be heavy when you're not used to it. A week after we buried her, I went through her things. The facility had boxed everything neatly. Clothes, shoes, a handful of old photographs. The purse she carried the night she tried to leave. I set the boxes on the living room floor and opened them one by one. Eli sat nearby, not touching anything, just present. Inside the purse, I found the boarding pass. Phoenix, midnight departure, unused. I held it for a long time. That little piece of paper had almost cost us everything. Beneath it, there was something I hadn't seen before. A small envelope with my name written in her sharp, unmistakable handwriting. No drama, just for Daniel. My hands didn't shake when I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Not an apology. Not exactly. It read, "You always believed the house was wood and nails. It was never that. It was proof that you didn't need me to survive. I mistook that for abandonment. That was my failure, not yours." I read it twice, then once more. No tears came, just a slow understanding. All those years of friction, of control, of sharp words. Underneath it had been fear. Fear that once I built something solid, I wouldn't look back. The truth? I had looked back, over and over, even when I shouldn't have. Eli leaned forward. "What does it say?" I folded the letter carefully. "It says she knew," I told him. "Knew what?" "That we were stronger than she thought." He nodded slowly. Kids understand strength in simple ways. That night, after Eli went to bed, I walked through the house again. Not checking locks, not listening for gas. Just walking. The kitchen stove sat silent. The porch light hummed softly outside. The floorboards creaked the way they always had. Still standing, but now, fully mine. I took the matchbox from my dresser drawer, held it for a moment. Then I walked outside to the trash bin and dropped it in. I didn't need the reminder anymore. Because here's something I learned too late, but not too late to use. You can't build your life trying to extinguish someone else's fire forever. At some point, you have to step back and let it burn itself out. She tried to take the house. She tried to take the money. She tried to take control. In the end, all she really wanted was reassurance she still mattered. And maybe I could have given that differently. Maybe not. But what I know now is this. The house didn't survive because I was stronger than her. It survived because I finally stopped fighting her fear with my own. Sometimes revenge isn't about striking back. Sometimes it's about breaking the pattern. And sometimes, son, the real inheritance isn't property. It's the choice to live differently than the people who raised you. You'd think the story ends with a funeral. It doesn't. It ends with ordinary days. That's the part nobody tells you. After the paperwork was finished and her name was finally cleared from everything, I stood in the county clerk's office holding a fresh copy of the deed. My name alone, clean, final. No shared signatures, no ghostly leverage, just mine. I didn't feel triumph. I felt weight. Because ownership without conflict feels different than ownership earned through tension. When I got home, Eli was in the driveway, trying to fix his bike chain. Grease on his fingers. Jaw set stubborn like he was wrestling the thing into submission. "You need help?" I asked. "No," he said quickly. Then paused. "Maybe." I knelt beside him and showed him how to realign the sprocket, how not to force it. "Don't muscle everything," I told him. "Sometimes you just guide it back into place." He looked up at me like I'd said something bigger than a bike lesson. The chain slipped back on smooth. He smiled. That's when I realized something. This house almost burned. Not because of accidents, not because of fate, because someone was afraid of being left behind. And fear makes people do reckless things. That evening, I made a small change. Nothing dramatic. I moved her old armchair out of the living room. Not in anger, not in rejection, just relocation. I carried it to the garage and set it by the workbench. The living room felt wider after that. Breathing room. A few months passed. No lawyers, no midnight calls, no taxi headlights in the driveway. Just seasons shifting. One evening, Eli and I were sitting on the porch, watching a summer storm roll in. Thunder low in the distance. "Grandpa," he asked, "were you scared that night, when she had the match?" I thought about it honestly. "Yes," I said. "Of her?" "No," I answered. "Of what fear can make people do." He nodded slowly. Then he asked the question that mattered. "Do you think she loved you?" I didn't rush the answer. "Yes," I said finally. "But she didn't always know how to love without holding on too tight." Thunder cracked overhead. Rain began falling heavy against the roof. The house stood solid. Always had. That's the thing about houses built carefully. They survive storms, and sometimes they survive the people inside them too. I leaned back in the porch chair and watched the rain hit the yard. "You know, kid, I've had people ask me if I was angry at her in the end. Truth is, anger burns too much energy. I was tired of burning. What I felt was something quieter. Relief. Relief that the match never touched flame. Relief that my grandson learned courage instead of chaos. Relief that I finally understood something simple. You don't inherit your parents' fear unless you agree to carry it. She tried to set fire to wood and walls. But the real test wasn't the house. It was whether I'd let her fear define my life. I didn't. And that's the only victory that ever really mattered. Sometimes the strongest revenge isn't destruction. It's stability. It's a locked door. It's a steady hand turning off the gas. And sometimes, son, the bravest thing you can do is let the fire die with the one who lit it.